Picture this. You're a Roman legionary, your feet bloody from marching 20 miles through mud and snow, your shoulders screaming under 60 pounds of gear, and death lurking around every corner. But what kept these Iron Men moving when their bodies wanted to collapse? What fuel powered the greatest military machine in history? The answer isn't glory or gold, it's the brutal, stomach-churning food crammed into their leather satchels. Today, we're diving deep into the 10 brutal foods Roman legions survived on. And you won't believe how these simple, often revolting meals built an empire that ruled the world for 1,000 years. From tooth-shattering biscuits that could crack your jaw to sour swill that would make modern soldiers gag. These weren't gourmet delights. They were weapons of survival, ingeniously designed for logistics that spanned 3 continents. We'll uncover shocking truths that textbooks never tell you. How did they transport millions of tons of grain across treacherous seas? Why did vinegar become a soldier's most precious possession? And what desperate, nauseating foods did they resort to when starvation stalked their camps? Prepare yourself for a journey into the brutal reality behind Rome's unstoppable war machine. We're about to humanize these legendary warriors, revealing their struggles, their ingenuity, and the eternal lessons hidden in their mess halls. If you've ever wondered how Rome conquered half the known world on an empty stomach, you're about to discover the shocking answer. Let's march into the blood-soaked kitchens of history. Behind every triumphant Roman legion stood a masterpiece of ancient engineering. A food supply system so brutally efficient, it could feed hundreds of thousands of soldiers across vast hostile territories. But this wasn't some romantic tale of abundant feasts. This was survival logistics at its most ruthless, where a single miscalculation meant death by starvation for entire armies. Picture the staggering scale. Each legionary received 66 pounds of wheat monthly, deducted straight from his pay whether he liked it or not. But getting that grain to the front lines, that was where Roman ingenuity met harsh reality. Armies dragged massive herds of cattle like living, breathing supply depots, their bellowing echoing across battlefields. When livestock ran short, soldiers turned predators, hunting everything from wild boar to field mice, or simply requisitioned from terrified local populations, sometimes at sword point. Without refrigeration, every scrap of food became a race against time and rot. Salt, smoke, and fermentation weren't cooking techniques. They were weapons against decay. Centralized granaries and frontier forts stored millions of pounds of grain in specially designed warehouses, while portable mills ground fresh flour wherever legions camped. But here's the brutal truth. Even this incredible system could fail catastrophically, leaving soldiers to choose between surrender and eating their own leather belts. The logistics weren't just impressive, they were terrifying in their efficiency.
This tastes like
Picture
the bottom
supply
of a
convoys
stale
stretching
river.
for miles, defended by auxiliary troops carrying everything from
Get used to
amphora
it.
of olive oil to barrels of garum fish sauce. Roman pragmatism turned scarcity into strength through pure discipline. Lazy soldiers got barley instead of wheat, livestock fodder that marked them as disgraced in front of their brothers. This wasn't just feeding an army. This was psychological warfare through food control. As we dive into these
Forward
10
now,
brutal foods,
without
remember this.
hesitation.
Every bite represented a triumph over impossible odds, but also the harsh price of empire. These men, far from home and family, found ways to survive on meals that would horrify us today. But what exactly were they choking down around those campfires? Let's start with the foods that could literally break your teeth. Number 1, Bucellatum, the tooth-shattering nightmare that kept legions marching. Imagine biting into something harder than concrete, knowing that one wrong move could crack your molars and leave you unable to eat for weeks. These weren't biscuits. They were survival tools disguised as food. Twice-baked wheat discs that could last months without spoiling, but required the jaw strength of a wild animal to consume. The process was brutally simple, yet ingenious. Wheat flour mixed with water and salt, formed into flat rounds, then baked until every drop of moisture evaporated. Then baked again, hence biscuit from the Latin bis coctus, meaning twice cooked. The result? Rock-hard discs that Roman soldiers carried like edible shields, knowing they represented the difference between life and starvation. But here's the shocking reality. Eating Bucellatum dry could destroy your teeth. Soldiers learned to soak these iron-hard rations in whatever liquid they could find. Water if they were lucky, wine if they were celebrating, or their own sour Posca when nothing else was available. Watch them around evening campfires, grinding these relentless bricks into something resembling porridge. Their jaws aching from the effort, Vegetius, the great military historian, tells us legionaries carried 2 to 3 days' worth stuffed in their packs, several pounds of what essentially amounted to edible stones. Modern hardtack seems like cake compared to Bucellatum. These weren't meals. They were endurance tests that separated true legionaries from everyone else. Number 2, Posca, the sour swill that saved the Roman Empire. If Bucellatum tested their teeth, Posca tested their stomachs. This wasn't some exotic military secret. It was diluted vinegar that would make modern energy drinks seem like luxurious indulgences. Yet this acidic nightmare became the backbone of Roman hydration, a primitive sports drink that kept armies alive in conditions that would kill ordinary men. Picture the brutal reality. Water sources during campaigns were often contaminated with human waste, rotting corpses or livestock runoff. Drinking untreated water meant dysentery, cholera, or worse, diseases that could cripple entire legions faster than enemy swords. Posca's acetic acid acted as a primitive antiseptic, killing bacteria that would otherwise destroy an army from within. The recipe was elegantly simple and brutally effective. Sour wine, the kind that had turned too acidic for normal consumption, mixed with water in proportions that made it barely drinkable. Sometimes honey or herbs like coriander masked the harsh bite, but most soldiers drank it straight, their faces contorting with each acidic gulp. Even emperors recognized Posca's value. Hadrian famously drank it alongside his troops, sharing their hardships to earn their loyalty. When Christ hung dying on the cross, it was Posca that a Roman soldier offered on a sponge. Not mockery, but the most precious liquid in a legionary's flask, a gesture of genuine compassion from one suffering man to another. Modern research proves the Romans stumbled onto something brilliant. Posca's electrolyte content and acidity actually improved hydration better than plain water, while its vitamin C content helped prevent scurvy. These ancient soldiers accidentally created the perfect survival drink, even as it burned their throats with every swallow. Number 3, Laridum, the rancid fat that fueled conquests. If Posca burned going down, Laridum challenged every other sense. This wasn't bacon as we know it. This was chunks of salted pork fat cured to leather-like consistency and designed to provide maximum calories in minimum space. But when the brutal realities of campaign life set in, this delicacy could become a nightmare that tested even the strongest stomachs. Picture slabs of pure pig fat, salted until rock hard, then packed into leather satchels for months-long campaigns. In ideal conditions, Laridum provided essential calories and protein. Soldiers would fry it over campfires or boil it into stews, the rendered fat adding richness to otherwise bland meals. A single pound could provide a day's worth of energy for men burning 6,000 calories during active campaigns. But here's the stomach-churning reality. In desert heat or humid jungle conditions, Laridum turned rancid with terrifying speed. Imagine the stench, like rotten gym socks mixed with spoiled meat, wafting from supply wagons. Yet starving soldiers choked it down anyway, their survival instincts overriding their gag reflexes. The alternative was death, and Romans chose life even when it tasted like decay. Julius Caesar's commentaries describe his men surviving Gallic winters on little more than Laridum and determination. They mixed the rancid fat with foraged herbs and wild vegetables, creating stews that would horrify modern palates but kept legendary warriors fighting through impossible odds. Number 4, Puls, the bland porridge that built an empire. While Laridum assaulted the senses, Puls numbed them into submission. This wasn't food, it was fuel, a thick wheat gruel that represented everything practical and joyless about Roman military efficiency. Yet this monotonous mush fed more conquering armies than any other single dish in history. The preparation was brutally simple. Coarsely ground wheat boiled in water with salt until it reached the consistency of thick oatmeal. No sugar, no spices, no flavor beyond whatever desperate additions soldiers could scrounge. Day after day, week after week, legionaries spooned this gray mass into their mouths, knowing it was all that stood between them and starvation. But Puls revealed Roman pragmatism at its finest. Easy to prepare in massive quantities using simple camp ovens, it could be shared among tent mates and stretched with water when supplies ran low. Soldiers learned to customize their portions with whatever they could find: wild garlic, foraged berries, crumbled hard cheese, or precious drops of olive oil saved from official rations. Archaeological evidence from Roman forts shows Puls was consumed daily, sometimes multiple times per day. Imagine these hardened warriors fresh from brutal battles gathered around communal cauldrons ladling out this beige sustenance. It wasn't gourmet dining. It was survival elevated to an art form. The men who ate this monotonous meal conquered territories spanning from Britain to Mesopotamia. Here's what's truly remarkable. Puls connected Roman soldiers to their ancient roots. This was the original food of archaic Rome, the national dish that predated their empire by centuries. Every spoonful linked them to their ancestors, creating psychological bonds that strengthened military unit cohesion across impossible distances. Number 5. Barley, the grain of shame that humbled warriors. If Puls was bland, barley was a deliberate insult, a punishment that struck at the very core of Roman military pride. This wasn't just alternative food. It was public disgrace served in a bowl, designed to remind soldiers that their honor hung by the thinnest thread. Romans considered barley livestock fodder, suitable for animals but beneath human dignity. When legionaries received barley rations instead of wheat, every man in camp knew exactly what it meant. Someone had failed catastrophically. Cowardice in battle, dereliction of duty, or collective punishment for unit failures. Barley marked soldiers as temporarily unworthy of proper Roman food. The psychological impact was devastating. Picture hardened veterans, men who had faced barbarian charges and Germanic war cries, reduced to eating what they normally fed their horses. The coarse texture was harder to digest than wheat, causing stomach pain and intestinal distress that served as constant physical reminders of their disgrace. Polybius, the great historian, records how entire cohorts could be placed on barley rations after battlefield failures. In the frozen wastes of northern Britain, soldiers shivered over campfires boiling this shameful grain into barely edible gruel, knowing their comrades in other units were enjoying proper wheat porridge. The cold wasn't just external, it was the chill of lost honor. Yet even in punishment, Roman efficiency shone through. Barley was cheaper and more available than wheat in certain provinces, making it a practical solution for feeding disgraced troops, while maintaining the symbolic hierarchy that kept armies disciplined. When supplies were desperately short, even barley became precious, transforming from punishment into salvation. Number 6. Caseus, the rock-hard cheese that aged like stone. While barley humbled soldiers, Caseus tested their dental work. This wasn't the creamy, soft cheese of modern tables. This was aged goat and sheep milk pressed into blocks harder than wood. Designed to survive months of transport without refrigeration while providing essential protein and fat. The production process was ruthlessly practical.
We need to act now.
Fresh milk curdled with rennet,
before it's too
pressed
late.
under heavy weights to expel moisture,
We are together.
then aged in caves or storage rooms until it reached concrete-like consistency. The result was a dairy product that could crack teeth if bitten directly, but provided crucial nutrition when grated over meals or dissolved in hot liquids. Picture soldiers around evening fires, using knife points to scrape shavings from these cheese blocks, the fragments falling like snow into their steaming bowls of Puls. The aged cheese was often moldy and pungent after weeks in military supply trains. Its surface greenish-blue with bacterial growth that soldiers learned to scrape away without thinking twice. But here's the remarkable part. Roman soldiers often produced Caseus themselves in permanent frontier forts. They maintained small herds of goats and sheep, creating their own dairy operations that provided both fresh milk and aged cheese. Archaeological excavations reveal cheese-making equipment in military installations from Hadrian's wall to the Syrian desert. Modern cheese lovers would find Caseus almost inedible. Imagine super-aged parmesan with the consistency of granite and twice the salt content. Yet for men burning massive calories in harsh conditions, these rock-hard blocks represented vital nutrition and a taste of home, however distant that memory might be. Number 7. Lentils, the belly-bloating legumes that fueled armies and tormented tentmates. If Caseus was hard to chew, lentils created entirely different problems. These innocent-looking dried seeds packed enormous nutritional value into small packages. But their notorious side effects turned Roman military camps into zones of constant atmospheric warfare. Dried lentils were logistical gold, lightweight, long-lasting, and protein-rich. They could be transported across continents without spoiling, then boiled into hearty stews that provided essential amino acids missing from grain-heavy diets. Roman supply officers loved lentils because they stretched food budgets while maintaining nutritional standards. But here's the brutal reality that every legionary knew. Lentils produced legendary amounts of intestinal gas. Picture 8 men crammed into a leather tent after a lentil-heavy evening meal, the air becoming progressively more unbreathable as the night wore on. These weren't just fart jokes. In confined military quarters, digestive consequences became serious morale issues.
Just like we did.
Soldiers developed coping strategies born of necessity. They learned to combine lentils with herbs that reduced gas production, or to time lentil meals for days when they'd be marching in open air rather than confined to quarters. Some units developed elaborate protocols for tent ventilation after lentil dinners, turning biological necessity into military procedure. Archaeological evidence from Roman ports shows massive importation of lentils from Egypt and North Africa. Transported in sealed amphorae across the Mediterranean, ships' manifests list thousands of tons destined for military granaries, proof that Roman logistics officers considered the digestive discomfort an acceptable price for nutritional efficiency. Number 8. Vegetables, the mushy masses that prevented scurvy. While lentils caused internal chaos, boiled vegetables created external disgust. These weren't crisp, fresh produce. They were overcooked, slimy masses of cabbage, onions, and leeks that bore little resemblance to their original forms but provided vital nutrients that kept armies from succumbing to deficiency. Diseases. Roman military doctrine demanded that vegetables be boiled until thoroughly soft, a practice driven by practical necessity rather than culinary preference. Prolonged cooking killed parasites, bacteria, and other harmful organisms that could devastate military units faster than enemy attacks. The result was nutritious but visually unappealing mush that challenged even hungry soldiers. But imagine the psychological comfort these familiar flavors provided. A soldier stationed in remote Germania, thousands of miles from Mediterranean sunshine, could taste something resembling home in a spoonful of stewed cabbage. These vegetables connected men to civilian life, to gardens and families left behind for years of military service. Archaeological excavations at Vindolanda, the famous Roman fort on Hadrian's Wall, reveal seeds from parsnips, carrots, celery, and other vegetables grown locally to supplement army rations. Soldiers became farmers out of necessity, cultivating small plots around permanent installations to provide fresh produce for their brothers in arms. The nutritional wisdom was remarkable. Cabbage provided vitamin C that prevented scurvy. Onions offered antibacterial compounds, and leeks contributed essential minerals. Roman military medical officers may not have understood modern nutritional science, but they recognized that armies eating vegetables stayed healthier than those surviving on grain alone. Number 9. Wild game, the desperate hunt for protein. When official rations failed or ran short, Roman soldiers became predators, hunting anything that moved with the same ruthless efficiency they brought to human warfare. This wasn't sport, it was survival, and the menu included creatures that would horrify modern sensibilities. Standard game like deer, wild boar, and rabbits were prize catches, their meat providing protein and fat essential for maintaining strength during grueling campaigns. Soldiers developed hunting skills that rivaled professional trackers, learning to read animal signs, set snares, and coordinate group hunts that could feed entire centuries. But when desperation struck during sieges or failed supply runs, the definition of edible expanded dramatically. Historical sources describe legionaries catching and eating field mice, moles, and even rats when nothing else was available. Picture these hardened warriors, conquerors of civilizations, reduced to roasting rodents over campfires while enemy forces surrounded their positions. Livy's histories contain accounts of soldiers during extended sieges consuming everything from foxes to insects, their survival instincts overriding cultural taboos about acceptable food sources. Archaeological evidence from besieged Roman positions shows charred bones from animals that were never part of normal military rations, proof that desperation drove men to extraordinary dietary measures. The psychological impact was profound. Eating creatures they would normally consider vermin or pests stripped away layers of civilization, reducing proud legionaries to their most basic survival instincts. Yet these same men, after choking down roasted field mouse, would return to disciplined formation, fighting that conquered empires. Number 10. Garum, the stinky fish sauce that Romans couldn't live without. If wild game represented desperation, Garum embodied Roman culinary genius at its most bizarre. This fermented fish sauce was simultaneously the most beloved and most revolting condiment in the Roman world. A brown, pungent liquid that could transform bland military rations into something approaching actual flavor. The production process would horrify modern food safety inspectors. Small fish intestines, blood, and salt were packed into sealed containers and left to ferment under the Mediterranean sun for months. The result was a liquid with an overwhelming fishy stench that could clear rooms, but provided the umami flavor that made otherwise inedible meals palatable. For Roman soldiers, garum wasn't just seasoning, it was liquid morale. A few drops could transform a bowl of bland Puls into something that almost tasted like food from home. The sauce was so popular that it became a major industry, with different grades produced for different social classes. Military garum might be cruder than the premium version served to senators, but it served the same essential purpose. The smell was legendary. Contemporary sources describe garum's odor as overwhelming, capable of announcing its presence from considerable distances. Yet soldiers craved it so intensely that black market trading in superior garum became common in frontier forts, with men risking punishment to acquire better quality sauce for their rations. Archaeological evidence shows garum production facilities throughout the Roman world, massive industrial operations that processed tons of fish into this fermented sauce. Amphorae marked with garum symbols have been found from Britain to Syria, proof that Roman logistics considered this stinky condiment essential enough to transport across continents. Modern food scientists recognize garum as remarkably sophisticated. Its fermentation process created complex proteins and preserved essential nutrients while adding powerful flavor compounds. The Romans accidentally created one of history's most advanced condiments, even if its smell could knock a horse unconscious. We've marched through the brutal banquet that sustained history's greatest military machine, from tooth-shattering Bucellatum to gut-churning Garum. These 10 foods weren't delicacies. They were survival tools forged by necessity and refined by an empire that understood logistics as warfare by other means. Every hardened biscuit, every sour gulp of Posca, every piece of rancid Laridom represented Roman pragmatism transformed into edible form. Think about the men who consumed these meals daily for decades. Soldiers who could break enemy shields with their bare hands but spent evenings grinding grain by hand, their calloused fingers working primitive millstones while planning tomorrow's march. Warriors who faced Germanic berserkers and Gallic war chariots, then huddled around fires sharing bowls of gray Puls porridge, finding comfort in shared hardship. These foods tell a deeper story about Roman character. Where other armies would have starved or surrendered, Roman legions adapted, endured, and ultimately conquered. They turned nutritional necessity into military advantage, transforming the most basic human need, eating, into another weapon in their arsenal of imperial domination. The legacy echoes through modern military nutrition. Today's MREs, field rations, and combat provisions all descend from Roman innovations in portable preserved foods. Modern armies still struggle with the same challenges. How do you feed thousands of soldiers across vast distances while maintaining fighting effectiveness? The Romans solved these problems 2,000 years ago using salt, smoke, and sheer determination. But perhaps most remarkably, these brutal foods created bonds between soldiers that transcended individual survival. Sharing rancid Laridum or gas-inducing lentils wasn't just eating, it was communion, a daily ritual that turned strangers into brothers willing to die for each other. The men who built roads, aqueducts, and cities across 3 continents were united, not just by discipline and duty, but by the simple act of choking down the same terrible food together. Their example speaks across centuries to our modern world of abundance and waste. These Roman soldiers found ways to thrive on meals that would defeat us completely, turning scarcity into strength and hardship into opportunity. They remind us that human adaptation knows no limits when survival demands it. What brutal Roman food would you be brave enough to try? Could you survive on Bucilum and Posca while marching 20 miles a day? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear which of these 10 foods sounds most terrifying to your modern palate. If this journey into Rome's brutal military cuisine shocked you, smash that like button and subscribe to our channel. For more untold stories from history's greatest empire, hit the notification bell so you never miss our deep dives into the reality behind the legends. Until next time, Remember the lesson of the Roman legionary's mess kit. True strength isn't found in luxury, but in the ability to find nourishment in the most unlikely places. Vail, farewell, and may your own meals taste a little sweeter knowing what these iron men endured to build eternity.